What's up, guys? It is your boy SimoneFan101, and today we are going to be reviewing Thor Ragnarok. Now, after the financial success but underwhelming critical success of Thor: The Dark World, they decided to take Thor in a new direction. We've seen the very mythological parts of Thor. We could have gone more into it, but they decided not to. And after what we got with Thor: The Dark World, I'm not exactly surprised. Alan Taylor, thank God, did not come back to do this movie. Instead, they brought in a director by the name of Taika Waititi. Or is it Waititi? I don't know. Who acts as both an actor and a filmmaker. In terms of film, because he actually does play a character in this movie. He's known for directing films like Eagle vs. Shark, Boy, The Hunt for the Wilder People, and this year he either already has directed, or, well, he definitely already has, but this year coming out is a movie called Jojo Rabbit. So those are the things that he's done so far. Now, when it comes to this movie, Taika Waititi was directing. We went back to one producer with Kevin Feige, not Feige and Pascal, because the Sony has no involvement. This film had a budget of $180 million, but had a box office of $854 million, which shows that this movie was a big hit. And again, good word of mouth, definitely helped out with the new direction of Thor. And having the Hulk in there did not hurt things at all. So, okay, what's the plot? It's 2 years after the Battle of Sokovia, 2 years after the events of Age of Ultron. We're assuming it takes place in the present day when this film was released. Thor in the interim has not returned to Asgard since his scene with Odin/Loki at the end of Thor: The Dark World. And ever since leaving Earth at the end of Ultron, he did not go back to Asgard. Instead, he traveled across the universe that he knows, trying to find any signs of the Infinity Stones. And either he didn't find them, or he did, and didn't have any luck obtaining them. So anyway, we cut to Thor. He's imprisoned on this planet by an ancient being known as Surtur, who apparently Odin supposedly destroyed like 500,000 years ago. Now, because of Surtur, now this scene is important for two reasons. One, it introduces us to Surtur, who of course plays a big revealing part at the end of the film. And two, he reveals to Thor that Odin is not on Asgard, and that he will destroy Asgard as prophesied in the prophecy called Ragnarok, which of course is the destruction of Asgard. And of course he says he'll do this once he unites his crown, which is basically his helmet, mask, Shao Kahn-like thing, with the eternal flame that's in Odin's vault. Thor fights off Surtur, he seemingly destroys him, and takes his crown, thinking that he's prevented Ragnarok. However, he does take this new information that Odin's not on Asgard to heart. As he returns, he finds that Heimdall is no longer the keeper of the Bifrost. Instead, it's this one guy named Scourge, played by Karl Urban. Yes, the same Karl Urban who played Judge Dredd in the 2012 movie Dredd, or Dredd 3D if you want. So Heimdall was accused of traitorous acts. He went missing, and Loki, as he very soon figures out, has been posing as Odin for the last 4 years at this point. That being the fact that there's a play. And by the way, there was a play that was supposed to reenact the death of Loki, and the death of Loki supposedly in Thor: The Dark World. And just a fun fact: those two guys who played Thor and Loki in the play, they were actually Let's see if I can find them here. I know I had them earlier. Org. Sartor. Oh yeah, right here. So believe it or not, Luke Hemsworth, who's Chris Hemsworth's brother, actually plays Thor, the Thor actor. And you know who? And on the one hand it's sad, but on the other hand it's awesome. Guess who plays Loki's actor? Matt Damon. Yes, the Bourne movies, very own Matt Damon plays Loki in the play. That I thought was pretty awesome. I did not know that until I looked it up. I'm like, holy shit, Matt Damon's in this. Where the hell is Jason Bourne? Anyway, so yeah, Thor discovers, Loki is posing as Odin and forces Loki to to show him where Odin is. Odin was at an old like old men's retirement shelter, which is being demolished, which was very funny the first time I saw it. Then, with the help of Doctor Strange, who of course was just introduced in the movie, his own film, the year prior, they locate Odin in Norway. By the way, the scene with Strange, that's the scene that was teased in the credit scene of Doctor Strange. By the way, we don't see Doctor Strange ever again in the rest of this film, so if you're expecting a Doctor Strange-Thor team-up, awesome as that would be, that does not happen. So, they find Odin in Norway, who has chosen to stay in exile. And he explains to both Loki and Thor that not only is he dying, but his death will bring about Asgard's destruction. Because apparently, Hela is, who's the goddess of death, has been imprisoned by Odin for a long, long time now, going back way before Thor and Loki were ever born. And Hela is revealed as to be their older sister. She's escaped from prison now that Odin died, and Odin does die, in the old Nintendo way of just floating away like a fairy. But Odin dies. Hela escapes from prison. She attacks Odin. She attacks Thor and Loki. They try to escape through the Bifrost, but Hela follows them in the Bifrost, and both of them are attacked while in the Bifrost out into a planet known as Sakaar, not to be confused with Stakar O'Gord, who is a character from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Meanwhile, sorry about that. While they're dealing with, being unstuck in Sakaar, Hela, thanks to the Bifrost, arrives in Asgard, very quickly kills Volstagg and Fandral, played in this film again by Ray Stevenson and Zachary Levi. And she goes on hang on a second. And she attacks Asgard's armies and kills most of them, including Hogun, played once again in this film by Tadanobu Asano. So yes, the Warriors 3 are dead. Why is Sif not dead? Well, I'll explain that in a bit when I get to the analysis. So you have all that stuff. Hang on a second. Sorry about that. So you have all of that going on. She's taken over. She reveals that she and Odin, before the prosperous Asgard that we see today, the Asgard was once a place where they took over the 9 realms through armies. They took over, but then at some point, Odin decided to become a king of protection, not a king of destruction. Hela, being the goddess of death, clearly did not want this. She became not angry, but she became obsessed with power and tried to kill everyone to do it, to take over the throne. But then Odin imprisoned her soon afterward, and has been dealing with her ever since in terms of his power. Actually, that might explain why Odin is constantly going into the Odin sleep, so that way he may recover from having to keep Hela back from returning to Asgard. This is a little bit one of those things you can think about. Anyway, So she goes and tracks down various people, including the sword of the Bifrost, which behind their back has been taken by Heimdall, who of course has been on the run since Loki pretty much called him a called him a traitor. I mean, and so that's where we're at with Asgard. Back on Sakaar, Thor is captured by a woman that they just simply call Valkyrie, not because it's her name, but because she is a Valkyrie who was once who basically she's a disgraced member of a disgraced Asgardian who once actually fought Hela in order to keep her in prison. As a matter of fact, in the whole Valkyrie battle against Hela, she's the only survivor after one of the other Valkyries, later revealed in a flashback, sacrificed herself to save her. So she's been disgraced and is now drinking her life away, being kind of basically a bitch, and just being a complete asshole to everyone, caring about no one but herself and to a certain extent Hulk. And forgot to mention that Hulk is also on Sakaar as the Grandmaster's champion. The Grandmaster, of course, played by Jeff Goldblum very wonderfully. So you have Thor, who has to fight with being a gladiator, fights the Hulk, and through a bunch of shit and a lot of arguing between them, Thor is able to find the Quinjet that the Hulk came in. Because remember, at the end of Age of Ultron, Hulk hid himself in a Quinjet and somehow found himself on Sakaar. What this also reveals, ignore that. What this also reveals is that Bruce Banner has been Hulk for 2 years now, ever since the battle in Sokovia. He's been Hulk ever since then. But thanks to the message that Black Widow sent to the Quinjet before Hulk turned off the machine, Hulk is able to transform back into Bruce Banner. And of course, it's revealed by Bruce that, unlike before, where he and Hulk both seemed to be in control, now Hulk was in complete control, and Banner was kind of put in the background, and Bruce Banner had to fight back against his own body in order to become Bruce again. So they're on the run. Loki, who has since gotten into the good grace of the Grandmaster and working as one of his servants, fights Valkyrie and discovers, in order to capture Thor and get the bigger bounty and stuff, fights Valkyrie and discovers that, well, she is a Valkyrie. And after exposing what happened, and unlike Thor, Loki actually does know that the Valkyrie all died deaths, not at the hands of Hela, but they all died, and exposes this by basically reading her mind. We see the brief flashback. The way it's done is actually very well done. So she's captured by Valkyrie. Valkyrie eventually agrees to help out both Bruce and Thor get off Sakaar and go back to Asgard in order to fight Hela, and uses Loki as a means of, as like a peace offering almost. So, with a little bit of nudging from Loki, they all work together to escape Sakaar, but of course Loki tries to betray Thor, but Thor sees through this shit, being through this several times before, and is able to outthink or outsmart Loki. And he escapes along with Bruce and Valkyrie. They escape. Korg, who was the leader of all the gladiators that were stuck on Sakaar, who Thor had befriended, thanks to Thor, escaping, and with Valkyrie's help, they start a revolution. They escape aboard a ship. They find Loki and are able to free him from a kind of paralysis almost, the electrical paralysis. And they behind Thor, of course, go back to Asgard. Meanwhile, back with Thor, Thor arrives on Asgard right as Hela is about to find Heimdall and retrieve the sword, so that way she can take the undead armies of Asgard's past and rule over more than just the 9 realms. Now, with Thor, I was going to say Thor. Now, Now with Thor, he arrives. He goes to the throne, taking Odin's spear. I forgot to mention this earlier, but during their first confrontation with Hela, Hela destroys Thor's hammer Mjolnir in very easily. And so this time he uses Odin's spear as a weapon. So they fight. Valkyrie fights against the armies. Heimdall fights against the undead warriors. Bruce Banner turns back into the Hulk in order to fight basically Hela's giant pet dog. And a bunch of action happens. And through what was teased earlier, but Thor truly becomes the god of thunder, not just quote unquote, to quote Odin, the god of hammers. So that way he can basically truly become the god of thunder, and not just someone who has a weapon that wields thunder. Let's see. So yeah, he's able to meet with the vision of Odin one last time to confirm this, and comes to the conclusion that Ragnarok. This was never about stopping Ragnarok. This was about starting it, and because Hela draws her power from Asgard, so in order to kill Hela, you got to take away her biggest asset, Asgard itself. So they use Surtur's crown, which in the beginning of the film was put into Odin's treasure room, to revive Surtur using the eternal flame. And of course we see the Tesseract in the room as well. And yeah, and Surtur comes out, kills Hela, most of them escape. Scourge, right before Surtur's revived, Scourge has a change of heart and fights for Asgard rather than against it, because he for the most of the film was in service of Hela. And and instead sacrificed himself in order to save most of Asgard's people on the ship that Loki and the gladiators came in. Surtur comes out, kills Hela, destroys Asgard, while Thor and everyone else escapes, including Valkyrie, Hulk, and Loki. Hang on a second. Ah, damn it. We see, well, let's go to the post-credit scene. Post-credit scene, we see the Grandmaster, who has since been overthrown by his former subjects. He confronts his former subject, or is confronted by his former subjects, but more importantly, the mid-credit scene, we see a Thor who's technically now the king of Asgard. In the ending, they decide to take everyone on Asgard and the gladiators as well to Earth. Now, in the mid-credit scene, they're intercepted by a large spaceship, which actually leads into the events in the beginning of Avengers Age of Ultron, Avengers Infinity War. More on that later, in that review. So yeah, that's the story. What do I think of the film? This is an absolutely fantastic film. I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again. This is one of the best the MCU has ever had to offer. This is one of the best films that they've released. And, well, let's look at the casting. Of course, Chris Hemsworth is great as Thor, but what's different about this film is that Chris Hemsworth plays a very different style Thor. One that has not been disgraced, but has, gone through a lot, is more funny, his hair has been cut, he's a little bit more comedic this time around. Actual comedy, not the dark world, naked scientist comedy. More like actual, funny lines and good timing. This is due in no small part to Taika Waititi in his directing. Tom Hiddleston likewise is great as Loki, and I'll get to the moral later because I am going to give this movie a very high rating, but the last push it needed was the moral, and I actually really do like the moral. Cate Blanchett as Hela was absolutely fantastic in the role. I actually did not recognize that was Cate Blanchett, and I had to look it up because it's been a while since I've watched anything with Cate Blanchett aside from Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and I couldn't recognize her voice. And I looked it up and like, holy shit, that really is Cate Blanchett as Hela, and I recognize her voice. Idris Elba, who, like in the first two movies, does a good job playing Heimdall. The difference, though, is that Heimdall is has a bigger role this time around, and is not just stuck in Asgard for the sake of being stuck in Asgard, but plays a bigger role near the end and throughout the film, being the one to keep all Asgard's people away from Hela and her undead warriors. So that I did like, and I liked how they gave Idris Elba a bigger role this time around. Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster is absolutely great in his role. He's very much like Hela. Hela is as another line of great villains that they went on, that MCU was on at this time. And her thing was that she was so blood hungry for power, but so charismatic at the same time. The same thing with Grandmaster. He was blood hungry for power, but not in the murderous, I want to murder everyone kind of way, but more like in the sadistic couch potato kind of way. So two different types of extremes of power that they wanted. And both of them are are charismatic. So you do have that. So yeah, Grandmaster was a great character. Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie was, she was very good in this movie. I wouldn't say amazing, but she was very good in this movie. There is one problem with the character, but I will get to that later. It has nothing to do with Tessa Thompson's performance. Although, to be fair, I am over the whole wokeness thing. And if you've seen recently, Tessa Thompson has been praising Brie Larson as, oh, she's the next generation. She will lead Hollywood into the new age for women actors and stuff. And it's like, fuck you. And she's done that, and she's overly praised Brie Larson before, so slowly but surely Tessa Thompson is appearing to go woke. But that aside, her performance was very enjoyable in this film, and that cannot be taken away from her. Carl Urban is Scourge, and actually does a very good job in the role, and in some ways, not always, but in some ways, is actually, in terms of the progression of the character, is actually better than Valkyrie, because not because we get a lot of time with the character, but because we see him visually speaking. We see him like facially, like his emotions, and that's the hallmark of a great actor. Speaking of great actors, we got Mark Ruffalo as Bruce, again playing a very different Bruce Banner and Hulk than we've seen in the previous films. Bruce Banner is stuck in a world where he doesn't know and is seemingly constantly stressed out. And Hulk is a very different character, because now Hulk is completely his own character. He's not just a vessel for Bruce to inhabit while someone else does the fighting. Hulk is his character, which I did enjoy. Anthony Hopkins is as Odin. Now, Anthony Hopkins does a great job as Odin. And look, he did a good job with him in Thor: The Dark World, but I said in that that film's biggest weakness was that, biggest weakness. One of the weaknesses, the weakness with Odin in Thor: The Dark World was that the Odin in Thor: The Dark World did not feel like the same Odin in the first Thor movie. This movie, Odin felt a lot more like the Odin of the first film rather than the Odin of the second film, which goes to show you the lack of real direction that second Thor film truly had. So yeah, this felt more like the Odin of old, where he was wise. Yeah, he could be, he was loud and roaring in the first film too, but he was also still king. Here, he's resigned to his fate. And he even still at one point chastises Thor when Thor sees him in a vision, and saying, like, even with two eyes, you can never see the whole picture. I really, in the, 2 scenes he was in? Well, 3 scenes technically if you count Loki pretending to be Odin. In the scenes he was in, Anthony Hopkins did great in the role. And as a matter of fact, though, I really did like it when how Odin was trying to portray Loki as being Odin. Like, I love seeing Anthony Hopkins like, oh, shit. that was just too funny. I'd say they have good performances, but they're barely in the film. But the guys who play the Warriors 3, Asano, Stevenson, and Levi, they all play Hogan, Volstagg, and Fandral. They die, and we barely see Volstagg and Fandral. We do get a sense of, but we do get a little bit, a tiny bit more with Hogan. Which is weird, because out of the 3 characters of the Warriors 3, he was the one that got the least amount of screen time. And then he is the one to die last at the hands of Hela. So that I found was kind of funny. Benedict Cumberbatch in his role as Doctor Strange, he did a great job in the one scene that he was in. Very, very enjoyable. Last one to mention was Taika Waititi himself, who plays Korg. He did the motion capture and the voice for Korg. So that I actually very much enjoyed. I'm like, yeah, I kind of did Korg, and I liked him. So you have that. So yeah, that's all the casting, and I know it's a lot, but to be fair, this is a bigger film than previously. The casting is all great, for the most part, or they're all great. The special effects are fantastic, and speaking of the effects, in terms of the visuals, it's not as visually interesting as, say, the first Thor film was, but you had Kenneth Branagh, who's a visual storytelling kind of guy. But it's definitely not as salty as, say, Alan Taylor's take of Thor: The Dark World. This one kind of finds an even mix, something that is contemporary yet extraordinary at the same time. We've seen enough of Asgard, so we don't see too many great big shots of Asgard, but we do see a lot of big shots, because we've seen Asgard before, but we do see a lot of big shots of Sakaar. And we even get a little bit of New York on Earth and Norway, which again, you didn't show too much, but it was contemporary enough to where it's not too bad. It's not too contemporary, but just enough to where you know it's Earth, but it still looks nice. The story, I really enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the comedy. I enjoyed the visuals. One thing I was surprisingly loved was the music. Now, they clearly took a page out of the Guardians of the Galaxy playbook, where they played a lot more songs and had a lot more weird visuals and stuff like that. Which, you know, Thor is basically in space, so you think that's what they would go for, and they did. And what I liked about the music in this film is, yeah, they had actual songs, but they also had the musical score. The score of the first two films was very much drenched in mythology. If I had to make a comparison, the score of the first two Thor movies was very much Lord of the Rings style in terms of how they did the music. In this film, it was definitely more techno and electronic music. And it really worked for the different style that they were going for here, because Thor is completely taken out of his element in this film. He doesn't have his hammer, his father's dead, and he's stuck in a world that he has no knowledge of. With Hulk, who's very different, and a Valkyrie who no longer wants to serve the throne. The guy is almost alone, except for maybe Korg. So you have that. Before I get into what I think is one of the best parts of this film, and I pretty much named all of them. The action, of course, is all great. I like the action scene between Thor and Hulk. That was very enjoyable. But, okay, so let's get into the negatives. And look, there's not a whole hell of a lot of negatives. Hardly at all. And really, they're more nitpicks than negatives. For example, two of them, really. One of them has to do with Valkyrie. And I don't know, maybe it is Tessa Thompson's performance, and I really do enjoy her performance, but the one thing that they tried to get across with her character was that she was a Valkyrie that's fallen from grace, and an Asgardian that has fallen from grace, and now has to fight her, and almost has to fight her way back, or people have to try to bring up the gracefulness out of her and be like the Valkyrie of old. The problem is there isn't. While I really enjoy the idea that in the beginning of the movie she's just a complete bitch, and at the end of the movie she's honorable, she's noble, and she fights for the right cause. But then there's the middle aspect where you have to see the change between the bitch and the noble warrior. You don't get a whole lot of that. You get a little bit of it with her confrontation with Loki, as well as the conversation she has with Thor right before he escapes. But I think if we would have gotten at least one or two more scenes of her, like, really, like searching inside of herself and knowing she has to make a choice. Instead, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. And on top of that, Tessa Thompson, while she does a good job in the role, the one thing I got to say about her is that I think she's a little bit straight-faced, a little bit too much. I think if she would have showed just a little bit more of the emotional acting when thinking about what happened in the past. And granted, she's playing as a drunk, so maybe that's part of it. But I think if there was a little bit more of the emotional appeal to really get us behind the character more, then I think the character would have been an all-time great. As it is, she's just a pretty good character, not a great character. My only other minor nitpick of the film is that as much as I love the stuff on Sakaar with Thor and Hulk and Valkyrie and Loki and the Grand Master, it comes at a cost. And the fact that we don't get a lot of time on Asgard. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen just a little bit more of Heimdall. Now, granted, I'm a big Heimdall guy, but I would have liked to have seen more of Heimdall. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of Asgard. Just a couple more scenes, not too many. But a couple more scenes of what's going on Asgard, and Heimdall, like, building like almost like, not a revolution, but kind of like a rebellion against Hela and her armies. I think if we, because we got a lot of time in Sakaar. There was a moment in time where like a half an hour went by and we got nothing from Asgard, or seemingly that's what it felt like. So that's my only other minor nitpick. Aside from that, the comedy works. Much like with Guardians 2, the comedy and the drama really mesh well together, and they really make it feel like a big, like it does work. And part of it is because we're laughing alongside these characters. We get to know them like this. When something bad happens to them, we legitimately feel for them. Just like what happened at the end of Guardians 2 when Yondu died. And, people were tearing up. I was tearing up. I cried. I shed a tear for them. I'm like, oh my lord, I can't believe it's actually making me do this. And so normally I'd give this film a very, very high 9 out of 10. But then, very recently, I changed my mind on that because I realized something. This movie actually has a moral. And I noticed this when looking on a scene online with Thor and Loki. This is the get help scene, which is very funny. But when Thor out-tricks Loki, he mentions that, Loki never wants to change, and even though he will always be the god of mischief, he could be something greater. And that got me thinking, this movie isn't all about an allegory for change. Not change in direction like Captain Marvel, that's just shit. But this movie was very much an allegory for change in terms of characters. You grow up, you change as a person. And that's what Thor was trying to say here. Because Thor had changed as a person. Not only had he caught on to Loki's things, Loki's shtick, but he has caught on very much to... But he's grown as a character. He's not the same character he was at the beginning of the first movie. He's grown, he's matured, and he's become more of a character that cares more about the people and is self-sacrificing rather than the selfish man he was at the very beginning of the first Thor film. And of course, not only did he change in that way, he also changed physically with his haircut and everything, and the things that's gone on with him in this film. Look at the Hulk. All the Hulk wanted to do was stay on Sakaar and be the prize fighter. But then after listening to Black Widow's recording, he and Banner, and we do see Hulk again as Hulk, but he and Banner have kind of come to the conclusion that, yeah, we're needed. We need to go. We can't just stay here forever. We have to go. We have to be the heroes that we are. And that I did enjoy. And Bruce didn't even want to go to Asgard, but after everything that happened, he's like, fine, it looks like I'm gonna have to, because I have to turn into this creature. You have, Valkyrie, who all she wanted to do was drink and be kind of, again, a bitch. But then after everything that's happened, she eventually comes to the realization that, yeah, again, it's my duty. I have to do this because because she doesn't want to forget what's happened. She doesn't want to forget her previous life. Granted, like I said, I wish it would have worked on the transition a little bit better. But I do understand where they were trying to go for. Even Karl Urban as Scourge. Scourge changed from a guy who was very much like Thor. He was selfish. He wanted recognition, and he got the recognition from Hela, but at what cost? To the point where, again, his emotional face and visual storytelling just told the entire tale. And when he realized that there was no one else to defend Asgard, as the Asgardians, as Hela's minions were boarding the ship, he made the ultimate sacrifice by destroying Hela's soldiers, and Hela, of course, kills him. But again, it's a change in his character, and again, he's a minor character, so I'll give that more of a pass than I did with Valkyrie. But with him, it's also very good, because we see the visual storytelling aspect. We see his the emotions on his face. We see what he's actually thinking. That's something that the one thing about the Valkyrie character I didn't like. We didn't see too much of what she was thinking visually. We saw that more with Scourge, honestly, than we did with Valkyrie, which is good. The one last thing and of course Loki does eventually change and becomes a little bit more heroic. Still very much Loki, but also becomes a little bit more heroic and does go to Asgard instead of just escaping somewhere else. Then you have Odin. And of course his backstory was that he was originally almost like a dictator, where he just took over the realms, but then eventually decided to become a benevolent ruler and try to be a protector of peace rather than a symbol of violence. And you can change as a person, even at your older ages. Then with this move, you look at the villains, and this is the cool thing about them. They never want to change. Hela just wants to be the goddess of death and nothing more. She just wants to be a destroyer. Look at the Grandmaster. The Grandmaster, all he wants to be is a couch potato while he just sits around and lets his warriors do the fighting and entertain himself and everything to go his way. Hela wants to destroy everything and wants nothing more than just to be the goddess of death and just a person who just wants to destroy. But of course they can't see it, and because they absolutely refuse to change at all, that leads to their ultimate destruction. Because never wanting to change sometimes can lead to worse things. And that's exactly what happens to both the Grandmaster. The Grandmaster is overthrown, and Hela is killed as a result. And this movie is a giant allegory for change. That's what I really enjoyed about this movie, watching it again this time. Which is why I'm going to give this film a 10 out of 10. There are a couple of tiny flaws, but a lot of the positives completely outshine the flaws. So much so that, again, you could easily ignore that and just enjoy the movie as is. So yeah, 10 out of 10. That's my rating. So I'll see you next time, guys, when I review Black Panther. Make sure to like, comment, and/or subscribe down below. Hit that like button if you want to. Until next time, guys, be well, stay safe, have a good day, and I'll see you next time, guys, when I review Black Panther. Until next time, guys, peace.